Right now, I want to go out live to the America's First Warehouse, where our own David Zier just did a fantastic hour with Kash Patel. Of course, he is the author of the new book, Government Gangsters. Let's go out to the America's First Warehouse. David Zier, Kash Patel. Mr. Zier, how are you?
I'm wonderful. You know, every time I hit refresh on social media, another embassy's on fire, so everything's crazy right now. But Kash joined our live studio audience, and he's here to answer some of your questions.
Well, I want to thank you guys for giving us a few moments, and I apologize to all of you, and including the audience, if I asked stuff that you've already gone over in the last hour. Kash, great to see you. Of course, congratulations on the book. You know, I was thinking, Kash, if you wanted to destroy America from within, what would you do? If I made a list, you'd probably turn every major college campus into a woke, indoctrinated Hamas cheerleading place. You would, you'd fund and rearm Iran and the Palestinians. You'd throw the southern border open. You'd claim and push climate change as the greatest threat to the country. You'd turn the military into a woke, more interested in if men can breastfeed than being ready to fight wars. You would unleash police state tactics against your number one GOP political opponent, and you'd spend the country into oblivion. So basically what I'm saying is you would elect Joe Biden, basically.
It's so awesome to be with you all on your show out here, especially live in New York on Long Island, my original hometown. I appreciate you guys having me. Look, if you asked me 5 years ago that list you just siphoned off, I would tell you we're living in sci-fi. There's no way a commander-in-chief could possibly do that. There's no way a collective mass in government across the executive, judicial, and legislative branches would come together and do that. There's no way the media would lie about it year after year about every single thing you just discussed. And here we are in 2023. Instead of winding out of the remaining world wars, we're +2 world wars. That's a net change of 6 world wars, from Donald Trump winding down 4 to Joe Biden allowing 4. And as you said, that's just the tip of it. That doesn't even bring us into the homeland here. And the challenge that we're going to have is educating the American public on what you just said is not hyperbole. It's not right-wing conspiracy. It's the truth. It's happening in our communities. And I think we're winning because with great audiences like here and real great networks like Real America's Voice, people are starting to see, wait a second, you guys were right. And so now is not the I told you so moment. Now is the moment to say, here's more truth. Go out and feed it into your communities.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And Damon, don't forget, you know, the George Floyd, BLM riots, Trump derangement syndrome, and the COVID lockdowns. So that's why we're here, too.
Yeah. You know, Kash, I know you played golf with the president. I'm interested in his, state of mind and what spirit he's in. But he put an op-ed out today in Newsweek, and the opening paragraph of that basically says, when we have a weak president in the White House, the cost can be greater than our worst nightmare. And that's exactly what we're seeing right now.
I mean, just think about it. Hit the pause button for a second. This was terrible 2 weeks ago. This was terrible before World War IV started. This was terrible before thousands of innocent Israelis and Americans were killed and mutilated and taken hostage. Now we have another world war. You're right. And the president is absolutely spot on. The reality of this situation is far worse than any that we could have predicted. And it is a calamitous result of these disastrous decisions on failing to secure American national security interests by weaponizing and politicizing intelligence. And let me give you an example that I didn't talk about in the earlier show. The guy that's in charge of intelligence in Joe Biden's White House is a Palestinian sympathizer who has now been exposed chanting and in a picture pro-apartheid Israel and Hamas. This is the guy in charge of prioritizing Joe Biden's intelligence. His name is Mahar Battar. You can look it up. That is not fake news. That is the reality. And by the way, Robert Malley, Joe Biden's selected envoy for Iran, has been suspended because of his ties to Iran. These are the people in charge of safeguarding America.
Yeah, you know, when you look at this situation we're in, Kash, right now, you see the Biden administration trying to waffle this line down the middle of saying things in public that sound, okay, they say the right things. But you see Anthony Blinken now, he's been there twice. The president's on his way. Everybody's canceled on the president already. He's barely gotten into the air. Everybody's canceled their meetings with him. Blinken was there for 7.5 hours, and it just seems to me that what they're trying to do is get the Prime Minister, Netanyahu, to basically bend to Biden's demands to say, well, you got to put all these restrictions on. We need this humanitarian aid. Iran's not involved. The $6 billion nothing's happened with that money. Basically tie his hands and get him to bend to everything Biden wants, which is basically trying to restrict him from almost doing anything, it seems.
That's exactly right. What they're trying to do is govern by media. They're literally governing through newspapers and TV and hoping that the mainstream media overseas, which are in their pockets, will propagate these lies and say, oh, if we just cut a check for $500 billion, we will end this war, which is a total lie. If we say to the world that the $6 billion Joe Biden gave to Hamas in Iran right before the war started and that it's frozen, maybe they'll believe it. These are lies at the national security level, at the international level, and the consequence you are seeing is, when was the last time, who cares if it was a Republican or Democrat, when was the last time a president of the United States was in the Oval Office and said, I'm coming to a theater of war to end a global conflict and save the loss of life on all sides, and the leaders of those nations didn't take his phone call, canceled their meetings with the leader of the free world, and said, you know what, if you want to come over here and hang out at the hotel, that's fine. But that's the reality of it. They always took Donald Trump's phone calls. They always feared Donald Trump's ability on the diplomatic stage to outmaneuver them. And that is a righteous fear to have. We have none of that in Joe Biden. And I don't know if he's made it up the stairs of Air Force One, but we should take a look at that too.
And Damon, they left Blinken overnight, and they didn't show up for the meeting at all until the next day.
Yeah.
And
Kash,
that's it.
Let me ask you this. I referenced yesterday on the show Carolyn Glick, who knows this area very well. She works, I think she writes for the Jewish Times. She pointed out yesterday that following September 11th, the UN Security Council passed Resolution 1373 under Chapter 7 of the UN Charter, which basically says, and it's binding on all UN member nations, basically stipulates that all UN member nations must refrain from providing any form of support, active or passive, to entities or person involved in terrorist attacks. And she's saying, when you're hearing them talk about humanitarian aid, it's a joke to think that humanitarian aid is actually is what they call it, going there, because Hamas runs everything. So she makes the point to saying whether it's active or passive, it's assistance to Hamas, and it's hence illegal. What do you think about that?
No, look, this is akin to dropping off humanitarian aid to the Mexican drug cartels and saying they're going to fix things down in Mexico and they're going to safeguard their communities because we gave them $5 billion in food and clothing and shelter and water. This is another government boondoggle dictated by the United Nations, which is one of the biggest failures on the global stage. And now what they're doing is joining forces with Biden to come in and say, well, if we tell the world we're standing with Israel, and if we send money over there, and we have no idea where it goes, nobody will actually track the money. It'll be 5 years later that they prove to us that the money actually went to Iran and a nuclear weapons program, or Hamas to blow up another hospital, or Hezbollah to come in and attack America at our bases overseas. And this is what they're going to run with and hide behind the mask that is the UN, and just wait for it. Joe Biden is going to go over there and prop up the UN and say, look at what a marvelous job they're doing, because he has totally failed, and he's going to use that as his backstop.
Yeah, let me ask you a couple other things I want to get your opinion on. Chris Wray says he's now worried about rising threats to the homeland. I guess he's found time away from sitting in the parking lots at school board meetings, which I guess is good to know. But this is probably just the beginning of an open border and things that are going to come home to roost. What did you think about what the FBI director said the other day?
Yeah, this is the same Chris Wray who had intelligence about January 6th and hid it from us and cabinet secretaries in the Trump administration. So you can decide what to do with that. And then fast forward to now, today, and he's saying domestic terrorism, is an actual threat. What have you been doing the last 2.5 years when 225,000 illegals have been crossing our country every day? When you have 24 known terrorist affiliates entering this country, how did you, the FBI, lose them? That's what the DHS secretary just admitted last month. And you expect us to believe you, Chris Wray, because you have now issued a heightened security posture that somehow your directive is going to be the edict of the land that controls our national security and our safety. He has failed across the board because he's weaponized justice. But make no mistake about it, that is just FBI leadership. It is not the everyday men and women who chase down criminals across this country.
Yeah, absolutely. So you have this Obama judge, Cash, in charge of this trial, and I think she's the tip of the spear. I've been saying there's a reason she tried to jump in front of Judge Eileen Cannon in Florida to be first, because they're basically saying, okay, you're going to go get us a guilty plea no matter what you have to do. It's kind of like Newt said in that call in Georgia, where he called and said, no, you have to indict tomorrow. Well, we're not ready. Well, you don't understand. You need to indict tomorrow. I feel the same way about this judge in D.C. You have to get us a guilty verdict no matter what you have to do. She's the tip of the spear here. And now she's ordered this shocking, unprecedented, and I'd say unconstitutional gag order on the president. Meanwhile, you have a prosecutor leaking endlessly to his friends in the media. What does the president do here, the former president?
He continues to fight relentlessly like he does and shows up every day and turns the courtroom into a mission of justice. And look, these people, the prosecutors, the judge, they have a history of this. When I was running Russiagate, the Russiagate investigation for Congress for Devin Nunes, and we figured out that Fusion GPS and the DNC were funding the illicit Steele dossier, do you know what federal judge we landed before when we issued our subpoenas to get those bank records? Sure. Judge Tanya Chutkin. You can't make this stuff up. Do you know who, after a month of heavy litigation, recused herself from those proceedings? Judge Tanya Chutkin. Why? Because she represented Fusion GPS and the DNC. So I ask America, how can this judge be a neutral and arbiter judge of the facts and the law when the victim of the crime, Donald Trump, is before her as a party? This has been planned for years. This judge needs to be recused. And the only person that can actually get that truth out more than us here on Real America's Voice is Donald Trump. And you're going to see it. I think they've appealed the gag order. I think the gag order is unconstitutional. It is election interference and election rigging at its highest moments. And Americans are seeing that for what it is. And I hope Donald Trump, and I know Donald Trump's going to continue to just unleash the barrage legally in the courtroom.
And Trump said he's not afraid to go to jail over it. So
it's amazing.
I got about a minute here, Cash. I know you said that a 24-hour floor cycle is plenty of time for House Republicans to air their grievances, come to compromises, and elect a new leader. You said, I don't mind it taking a day, but that's all it should take is one day. Yeah. After what you saw today, what are your thoughts on what you saw today?
Yeah, I wanted a speaker by the end of the day. We didn't get one. We really need one tomorrow, and we need one so we don't kick the cans of continuing resolutions and the economic deficits down the road, so we don't get bootstrapped with some boondoggle aid package for the Ukraine, and which are already ginning up right now in the defense industrial complex. So, look, if you guys don't think members of Congress are listening, they're listening to you. Start calling them. Start emailing them. Tell them, remind them, you work for us. They always tell us it's the people's house. Well, get your stuff in order over in the people's house so you can govern for us, the American people. I really hope they get it together by tomorrow, but it's up to us and everyone
especially
watching. Call into Congress.
Call the New York delegation.
All right, he's the author of Government Gangsters. Kash Patel, David Zia, thank you very much.